Welcome to Positive Disintegration, a path to authenticity. This episode is the first episode of a two-part conversation. Chris and I are talking to Autum Romano about polyvagal theory and how our nervous system plays a part in our development and our relationships. We explore what polyvagal theory is, how our nervous system works, and talk about the three states in the theory. We also draw out connections with the theory of positive disintegration. I hope you enjoy this episode and will join us again for part 2. Hello, lovely listeners. Welcome to Positive Disintegration. I'm Emma Nicholson.
I'm Chris Wells.
And Chris, today we're talking about something that I know we've mentioned before on the podcast, but we've never really had a deep dive in, and that's polyvagal theory.
That's right. I can't wait to talk about it tonight with my friend Autum.
Awesome. So without further ado, our guest today is Autum Romano. Autum is an educator, author, and bodyworker who's passionate about nervous system regulation as a foundation for transformative whole health. She has certifications as a neuromuscular therapist, licensed massage therapist, safe and sound protocol provider, craniosacral therapist, Reiki master, and certified trauma-informed care provider. And she has over 28 years' experience in the field. With an intuitive healing approach, Autum thinks she's likely twice exceptional, but still exploring and discovering her special blend of spices. She recently collaborated with Stephen Porges and Karen Onderko on a case study for their upcoming book, Safe and Sound, a polyvagal approach for connection, change, and healing. And in collaboration with her son, has authored a children's book titled Body Wisdom and the Polyvagal Theory. Welcome to the podcast, Autum.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you both for having me.
We're so happy to have you with us. Autum, since I met you at the Soul Spark Empowerment Series in 2020 during the pandemic, I have to say that you are like one of my favorites, and I'm so happy to have you here tonight because you're just one of the people whose energy is so calm, healing. Like you are just a great person to be around. And I know that this is the kind of episode where you're not only talking about something important and educating our listeners about something, but your very presence in this episode will be good for them to hear. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's really interesting. Even though the three of us here are across the globe meeting, and then all our listeners will be all over the globe, it's fascinating that this is like polyvagal theory in practice because our nervous systems are responding to each other, even though all we have is our audio, because that's part of how the vagus works and how what polyvagal theory explains is how, like you said, what is happening inside of me. I mean, so as I'm preparing for our interview, I mean, yes, I'm thinking, right? Because I'm thinking about, we're using words. So I'm thinking about, words, but I'm mostly really trying to regulate my body in preparation because my voice carries the information of what's happening inside of me into your ears, Chris, and your ears, Emma, and then your body responds to that. It's when you say that kind of, what you feel when you're with me, I mean, that is, you're putting it into words and you're bringing it into consciousness. But this is, one of the core principles of polyvagal theory, what Dr. Porges, he is the creator of polyvagal theory, and this is a term that he coined called Neuroception, and it is detection without awareness. So it's how your body is trying to figure out always, same as mine, all mammals, is like, am I getting cues of safety or am I getting cues of threat? And then how the body responds to that.
While you're talking about this, I can't help but think that it's a testament to where I am compared to how I used to be, that even though we screwed up, and listeners, please know that we've already recorded this part of the episode and then we had to go back and start again because I didn't hit the record.
We didn't record it. We were
talking.
Oh,
wait. Oh, so
we were talking, but we weren't recording nothing.
Through. That's so hilarious. All right. So we talked through the whole first part of this. And when I was younger, I mean, gosh, even 5 years ago, I bet I'd still be thinking about it. I'd be like,
Mhm,
I can't believe I didn't hit the fucking record button. And I
mhm.
would still be in my head worried about it. But now, I mean, I just know that it's going to be okay. I know you,
Yep,
I know
yep,
Emma, like it's cool. And
yep.
so we can all still be regulated, even though we made a mistake. And I think
Mhm,
that's one of the things that I've loved about learning about my nervous system is what you said. Like when I'm preparing to do an episode, when I'm doing anything really, I'm checking in like how am I coming across for other people? And well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but later I would like to come back to the fact that I realize that like anger when we're in a hard situation and struggling, energy comes through. And
mhm,
it's impacting us. And so yeah, when we're doing something like a podcast, we want to make sure we're like in the best conditions for
mhm.
having our voices carry our message.
And that was a whole other part of, like, to me, one of the big principles of how I think about nervous system health. So, sort of what I would call applied polyvagal theory is, especially in my work with clients, is, when we're talking about something being upsetting, whether it's already happened or it's something in the future that they're preparing for, I always say, hey, like, a healthy nervous system is a dynamic one. There's, like, no such thing that we don't get upset. That's, like, not how it goes. We're hopefully not getting stuck. So that's sort of the difference between a trauma response. So a trauma response is, yeah, we don't record, or we're not recording, and then that's upsetting, and then the body stays stuck in that and isn't able to come back to this place now, what we're talking about, this place of resonance, which is like a ventral state. This is a social engagement system. So that it's the way that our bodies can come back into connection and regulate together, co-regulate together. And so that is a healthy nervous system is one that goes through there's three kind of main states that our autonomic nervous system goes through, and that is knowing. It's sort of, I think about it too as trusting the body's ability to go ahead and be dysregulated and then, return to regulation when it's appropriate. And sometimes that's with assistance and sometimes it's not. But knowing that that is just a healthy part of being human.
One thing that we're going to ask it because we asked it to you about 10 minutes ago, but our first question is how you first discovered Dąbrowski's theory. And I know you and Chris were in each other's study groups because this theory
Mhm,
seems quite important, polyvagal theory. So tell us a
mhm.
little bit about how you discovered Dąbrowski's theory, but also like sort of what piqued your interest in that kind of overlap area.
Thanks, Emma. So I first heard about overexcitabilities in 2019 at the same conference in Houston. And then the next year, Chris introduced me to the theory when we were in the Soul Spark Empowerment series together. So I had like a a brief introduction to the work of Dąbrowski via overexcitabilities, and then a deeper dive from Chris. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I want to know more. And then Chris's study group was open at the time during COVID. So my husband and I joined that together. So yeah, I was like, I want to swim around in this theory. I want to totally get to know it. And then so cool that I was co-leading a study group. I think it was later the very same year. I think this was all 2020. And yeah, Chris was able to join that study group of polyvagal theory. So really cool. I think from the beginning, I as soon as I started to understand theory of positive disintegration, I could see the overlap, especially when you think about, let's just say OEs first, when you think about overexcitabilities. So even what Chris was saying about starting to understand the body, like I'm pretty sure I identify that I have all five OEs. And so of course, what's happening with me like somatically each day will influence the OEs, right? Like how rested are you? How are my hormones? My stress level, all that. But the more that I can understand how my body's going to have a big response to like sensory information, then that is going to help me plan better, recover better. So I think of that as a big overlap with polyvagal theory. Both of the theories have an overlap there, just in really understanding nervous system health. And I think that the nervous system function, and then specifically like sensory integration, that has a lot to do with overexcitabilities. Basically, it's like, okay, are your OEs going to dysregulate you or not? Right? Because you can still have like overexcitabilities and not have that be so overwhelming that your body goes into a defense. Right? So if we think about polyvagal theory as that the autonomic nervous system is always asking, not consciously. Neuroception is detection without awareness. So the vagus nerve is always saying, like, am I safe or am I not? Is the body going to respond by going into a connection mode or into a protection mode? So if we think about overexcitabilities, you can have the very same person who has, overexcitabilities, and they can be responding to a situation by either, moving into connection mode or moving into protection mode. There's a lot of overlap between the theories there. And I think self-understanding is a big part of how we can bring these theories into our own understanding and know ourselves well, and then use that information to hopefully like be the best version of ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I also see the connection between that and, somatic signs of disintegration, like particularly unilevel disintegration, where stuff comes out through our body. But what I want to do is like kind of lead into a little 101 on polyvagal theory. And
Okay.
I know very little about it. So I want to tell you my understanding of it, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong and expand from there. But I've noticed there's like 3 basic states in the nervous system. And one, as you talked about, was when you're in a safe space and like you're wanting to socially connect. And positive disintegration is all about relationships and how we relate to other people and ourselves and stuff. And then there's a second, it's almost like a fight or flight mode where you don't feel safe and everything's like switched on, trauma responses and stuff like that. Then the third state of basically freeze. So when we talk about fight, flight, or freeze, and I'm quite familiar with this because when I get threatened, I go into complete freeze and shut down. And that can lead to like inaction and stuff like that. So is that a reasonable approximation of it?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So there's
I'm
like
a fight
3.
responder.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to say that.
No,
I mean, it's so
funny.
different.
You so
I know.
are. You're such
When
a
Emma
fighter.
saying that, I was like, yes, Chris is red. So like I also
It's
think of
so
them as
funny.
colors. And I was like, oh, I wonder, like, yeah, Chris is totally red. I'm blue also, Emma. I'm like so that's the dorsal vagal complex, the freeze or shutdown. So yeah, I have a blue tendency also. So that's the protection mode, right? So if the body isn't going to move into connection mode or the ventral vagal, social engagement, or what I call green, then it's going to move either into red or blue. And typically, this is like the body decides this without our conscious thinking early on. And I haven't heard anybody say that they know exactly when, but this is tied to our early development. So like 0 to 3. I mean, it's almost like if we went and asked all of our mothers, like, oh, did I cry for a little bit and then stop crying? Or did I just like scream and scream and scream? So it's kind of interesting. It would be, like I said, I haven't heard anyone specifically say, oh, we know that our response is chosen by a certain age, but this is early stuff. So what's interesting about the body, so all mammals have a vagus nerve. So when we talk about polyvagal theory, we're talking about the autonomic nervous system. And the vagus nerve is one of our cranial nerves, and it's the largest one It's in Latin, it means vagus means wanderer. In Resmaa Menakem's book, he talks about My Grandmother's Hands. Sorry, that's the title. He calls the vagus the soul nerve, which is I love that description. So the vagus comes into our face. This is the social engagement part. Comes into our face, our ears. It is regulating how my voice is, even how we swallow. And then into the heart, there's a vagal brake on the heart. So that's all the ventral branch of the vagus, the social engagement, everything that is above the diaphragm. Everything that is below the diaphragm is part of the dorsal branch of our vagus, and it goes into virtually every vital organ in our belly, in our abdomen, has a lot to do with digestion. And when our body is exposed to information, it is, deciding right then, do I go into protection mode or connection mode? And so the vagus, 80% of it has afferent neurons, meaning that a lot of times we think about nerves as starting in as our brain and then going into our body. Well, for the vagus, when it says afferent, that means it's starting in the body and then taking that information to the brain. And then the brain responds. And all of this happens, this is like lower brain, right? This is like brain stem. So our body is deciding without our personality, well, if you will. We don't get to think about how we're going to respond. So if you think about say you heard a car backfire, are you going to startle or not, right? Are you going to have a jump response, a jump scare? And that is wholly dependent on your vagus nerve and how it responds. So, Chris might get mad. No, I don't know. And someone else might have a startle response or they might not. Or someone else that might scare their body so much that then it even has a diminished heart rate. So that would be kind of that dorsal response.
We definitely need to talk about the fact that, I was such an angry kid when I was younger. That's how I was
Mhm.
perceived, because I was
Mhm.
a fight responder. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting. One of the things that really helped me when I learned about polyvagal theory was reframe myself in the past as I was an angry kid, which has such a heavy emotional gravity to it. Like I was
Isn't
angry, I
it?
was so hurt. But it's so
Right.
different when you think, "Oh, I'm a fight responder." So I was constantly, fighting with everybody
Yeah.
because I was just in crisis. When you look back on it, so here's something heavy, or it would be, but it's not because, I've done my work. I'm about to be 52, and,
Mhm.
my father died when he was 52 because of alcohol.
Mhm.
And so when I
Mhm.
was young, I was reacting to the fact that I had a father who drank so much, and he was never sober. And I think
Mhm.
now, wow, he died when he was 52. And I'm about to be 52. But when my father was my age, he was like an old man and he was in terrible
Mhm.
shape. He'd
Mhm.
had both of his hips replaced when he was
Mhm.
41.
Mhm.
Alcohol destroyed his life. And so
Mhm.
when I think back when I was a kid and I was like, well, I wasn't an angry kid. I was in fight mode. I was
Yeah.
reacting to my environment and
Yeah.
the crises in my
Yeah.
life and trauma. And
When you
so
say that, I think, oh, you were a scared kid. Your body was not
always.
moving into connection mode. It was in protection mode. It was under threat all the time.
I was very explosive, but that was such a self-sabotaging way of being, and so that's
Mhm.
part of what makes it like a unilevel phenomenon is that it
Mhm.
was it would sabotage me in
Mhm.
relationships, especially because
Mhm.
I would scare people, I was
Mhm.
very impulsive, and I took it as in retrospect, oh, well, just always through a pathological lens, never thinking about that it was a natural response. And it just was my body's way. We all have preferences for how we respond and
Mhm.
how our nervous systems are. And yeah, it's interesting too to think, just as we're sitting here, I'm thinking about the Dąbrowski connections, of course, because that's what I do. And so I'm like, yeah, in his 1972 book, Psychoneurosis is Not an Illness, he talks about the nervous system in ways that align perfectly with polyvagal theory. Right now, I have that book up on my screen and I'm looking at the section like emotions as disintegrators and integrators, psychosomatic disorders, autonomic disequilibrium. I mean, this is what he was writing about, your body like reacting to your environment. And when you get control over that and you can live in a regulated state and be in social engagement most of the time, you have like worked through a unilevel disintegration to get there. If you're like now, I still get angry, but I'm not like a fight responder the way I was even 10 years ago.
Right. Right. Well, and there's so much self-awareness inside of kind of, living either of the theories, right? Is having the self-understanding of what's happening. So I'm guessing now when you know that you're in a fight or flight response, like does your body tell you first? Like what are your early signs that that's where you are, Chris?
It's really my words. Like,
okay.
I mean, I can tell because my impulse will be to like say something in a way that is like more loaded than usual or like more of a lashing out. And so for sure, the person who gets lashed out the most probably is like Michael, we have plenty of conflicts about things. And so, anyway, that's what'll happen. I'll catch myself in my words and be like, oh, that sounds angry. But sometimes I just let it go. And he'll always call me on it, of course, and be like, well, you're lashing out at me again. And I'm like, right, because we have that kind of relationship where you can say that to me and it helps me wake up to the fact if I haven't already realized that it's happening. But I see it in my words because I write every day. And so I can tell my angry words as I'm writing on paper. If I go to write the word fuck, you know that I'm mad. And so I used to swear all the time in my writing. If you look at my journals, even when I came to the theory, it was like, fuck this, fuck that in my writing. I mean, I don't really swear in my writing anymore unless I'm pissed.
Emma, like, do you know when you're in a freeze? Like, does your body tell you or your words tell you or your mind tell you? How do you know that that's where you are?
That's a good question. I first want to qualify the thing is I say fuck with abandon, but it doesn't mean that I'm angry. I think Aussies maybe have a completely different relationship to swear words because, we drop the C-bomb to refer to our friends, right? So it's not.
Well, it's not always in anger, but so I swear all the time. It's not that I'm using the word fuck. It's that I'm using the word fuck when I normally wouldn't.
I get it.
And I don't usually use the word fuck with Michael, but I will when I'm mad about something.
I just don't want listeners to think that I'm angry every time I say fuck because I'm not. I'm normally excited, actually. The freeze thing's interesting, though, because it was, I think, something that developed in childhood, but then when I was in an abusive relationship, like it just cemented that behavior so badly because when you have someone who's very angry at you and you feel threatened to your safety, like, that fighting back is just going to make it far more problematic than it already is, right? So this was something that was ground into me. And then as I got in a safer place, that behavior sort of went away and I was able to have more constructive, challenging conversations in difficult times and stuff. Every now and then it will get triggered and it's almost like my entire body stiffens up. Everything's like whirring in my head and I want to say all these things and I don't. And it's like it's so overwhelming that everything just wants to shut down. And I think it's because my body thinks if it shuts down, it can shut down my brain. It's not what's going to happen. But I just feel my body just become stiff and I start staring ahead and not making eye contact. I'm like, oh, that thing's happening. That thing's happening. And it's very rare these days that happens. But like when it does catch me, I'll just notice my body's just gone very still, very stiff. And I stop making eye contact with the person that like I'm having an argument with or a conversation with or whatever is happening. I just like won't look. And then I can get literally to a point where this used to happen where someone could be like screaming at me and I will just sit in a chair and look dead ahead and there's like it's like a lizard when there's a predator. It's like nothing. It's like complete shutdown.
Yeah, right. It's like a death feigning. It's like play dead.
Yeah. Play dead. So
I mean, it's really fascinating. And they're both adaptive response. That's what's so fascinating about this. Is like, you guys, look how cool and smart your bodies are. Is that both of them are like, okay, what is our best chance at survival? And then it chooses that without us having to think about it. That's what's so cool about how, like, brilliantly designed our bodies are. Is that you have these very dynamic and different responses. And then we're also talking about how there's some similarities over our lives thus far, in the same body, but then there's some nuance to it. There's some changes to it. And then, as when people get healthier, their nervous system becomes hopefully more resilient. And so that's when you were saying, oh, it doesn't happen this often anymore. Or Chris, you're also saying it doesn't, it happens like this. Or even like Chris, when you were talking about with Michael, and both of them actually are blended states. I want to explain that real quick. So like Chris, when you're talking about you and Michael, you're having like a debate, right? And that's kind of the difference between a debate and an argument is maybe there is still a lot of this red fight or flight sympathetic energy. Maybe someone's like warm, their heart is beating fast, they're like maybe kind of sweaty, right? Maybe their breathing is faster. But like when Michael says, oh yeah, are you gonna, lash out at me? He probably has enough of like a teasing kind of playful aspect to it, is he is kind of saying, hey, let me extend a hand to you. It is a peace offering because he's asking you to come back into relationship with him. And then when your body says yes to that, then your social engagement system is coming back in. So it's actually a form of play. That would be a blended state of play. You have this green ventral vagal connection happening going on with your autonomic nervous system, and then you also have this sympathetic fight or flight. So that's like a blended state. Same as Emma, when you're talking about the freeze, like when it first starts, that your body gets stiff. So then when the body gets stiff like that, it goes into this like hyper awareness, which is like it's sort of close to fleeing. So you have fight and then you have like flee, like run away. And then freeze is like that deer in the headlights, where the mind kind of gets pretty slow, doesn't really have a whole lot of capacity to respond, but the body gets like hypertonic, right? It gets really tight and rigid. And then if the body is in that space for too long, because it's metabolically costly, right? Like it takes a lot of just, calories and oxygen to stay in that like high fight or flight stage, that high sympathetic. It's like sprinting, right? If the body's in it for too long, then the body will just say, hey, our best way to survive this is to go further into that dorsal. So that freeze, that deer in the headlights is a blend of red and blue, the red being the sympathetic and the blue being that kind of dorsal shutdown. And so then, Emma, when you said that, if it gets bad, you'll just, be in a chair and someone can yell at you and you're like sort of, dead to the world. That's that kind of more of a shutdown. And I'm guessing at that point, your body's probably getting a little bit softer. It's not going to have as much high muscle tone.
yeah, it's you go through a state of like hyper awareness where you're like, I have to pay attention to every single stimulus because it's almost like two fighters waiting for someone to throw the first punch. And you're like,
Yep.
I've got to be like just still and watch them with this intensity. And even if you're not looking at the person, like you're picking up every single signal because you're like, I'm just waiting for them to lash out and I want to duck the punch kind of thing. But then, you get to a point where you're just like, let's try and block this out. And even your mind will like try and wander away and not think about it.
Yeah. Well, it's dissociation.
Yeah. And it's
a
funny, like,
numbness,
when you're saying your body knows how to
Yeah.
react. Like, I've occasionally gone into fight mode, but it's in situations where I'm threatened, but threatened by a loss of relationship or an abandonment, like don't go kind of thing, where you don't actually feel a physical threat to yourself, but you're emotionally threatened. And I've also gone into flight mode as well, where I'm like, fuck this, I'm running away from everything. I've literally just get in the car and drive off kind of thing.
Yeah.
and normally the freeze mode applies to a more imminent physical threat. So it's like I don't
Mm.
when I've been pushed into those places of that reaction, like my body knows like the level of danger and whatever, because it will choose for me which path it's going to go down.
So smart. Our bodies are so cool.
Our bodies are so cool. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking in multiple directions, and I almost wonder if I should like start making notes because it's going to be hard to remember things. But I mean, one thing I was thinking was that it's fascinating for me to listen to you both talk about your experience because it's so different from mine. And it's like, yeah, it's really fascinating because it's just another area where we don't know until somebody else is talking about having a different inner experience
Mhm,
than ours,
mhm,
that
mhm,
other people react the way they do.
mhm,
And it's like, oh, wow. So not everybody. And like, I'm realizing too while I'm listening to you that like when I think about the issues I have with Michael that I get upset about, they're like always interpersonal conflicts with
mhm,
people, or I've been
mhm.
like, I'm perceiving that I've been mistreated in some way. And so, think about what I was describing about my father. My wound is like having what I perceived as a rejecting parent when I was a kid. Having
Mhm,
a parent like that is tough because you're like, oh,
mhm.
wow, they're like unreachable.
Yeah.
So, now in adulthood, it's been amazing for me to have a mentor like Michael who I could have like an authentic emotional relationship with, who could be the mirror that I needed, to
Mhm.
show me how to not lash out, how to be like, okay, I don't want to hurt you just because I'm hurt.
Yeah.
That's not the
Yeah.
answer. But
Yeah.
like these things are so hard to figure out and actually work on because they're the way that we react when we're hurt.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and it's
um
to
yeah.
to know it is so good. I mean, it's also like this is like shadow stuff too, right? Is you want to know because it's not one isn't better than the other. They're just different. And really every single mammal has access to all three states. So, it's because blue that dorsal shutdown, that's also kind of like it can also be like deep meditation. It's just this like high parasympathetic, which is part of the dorsal branch. So, just being able to be in like a deep state of being present. So like right like Chris, for like your imaginal world, that's like you having like a that's part of your dorsal space. I'm guessing.
Well,
I'm
and it's like
guessing.
the place where I was able to have a relationship with a father. Like, what did I have in my imaginal world? I created a family that I didn't have in my
Mm,
everyday life and
yeah.
interacted there, which I desperately needed. Now I
Yeah.
realize like what an extraordinary coping mechanism that
Oh,
was for
right.
me. And
Right.
yet it was more than a coping mechanism because it was also like access to another
Mm,
reality. And I was
yeah.
able to like see myself operate there, and like in adulthood developed myself. It became like
Yeah.
a place of rehearsal, and it became a
Yeah.
place where I could observe relationships in my mind and be like, well, that's who I want to be. That's not who I want to
Yeah.
be. That's where the dynamisms like played out for me really on like a stage in my mind.
Mm,
And so, because like I could observe myself screwing up with people, I'm the kind of person who really
mhm,
plays things out in my head. But this
mhm,
is another issue. I've learned that it's healthier for me to not operate that way in that dissociative state, because when I do, I'm reinforcing the intense emotions that keep me in like fight mode. Like
mhm,
the more I'm dwelling in my imagination and I'm reliving traumas and hurts, well, the more dysregulated I am. And
mhm.
so, like, I
Yeah.
do so much better to not live in my imagination, and I'm happy to have integrated that process.
All the connection opportunity you had was not with other humans in your imaginal world. And so that's kind of the through line of when I think about, these last few minutes of conversation and the topics that we've been bringing up is the through line is that each one of us is talking about like, oh, when I understand this more, what I want is I want to make sure that I'm really prioritizing my relationships. Right. And so that's the connection bit. And so that as you understand, oh, my body is taking me into this deep protection mode, but I really wanna stay in connection, right? So for Emma, that looks like, oh, wow, maybe like a little bit of that fight energy is needed to kind of, right? Like be like, oh, focus. There's something you care about here. Go towards it. right? And kind of like take action towards keeping this relationship. And it's the same, Chris, like if Michael, if you guys are having a debate and you're like, okay, don't like you, because it can be a siren's call, I think, right? It's like going deep into each of these old states. As if we talk about, I think about it as getting stuck in them, that is the trauma response. So you can have the trauma response of rage, because rage is just sort of like, it is a little bit numbing, right? So is that deep kind of dissociative, is like that's numbing too. So it's interesting to have to be able to learn your body, understand where you are, and then to have that kind of deeper connection with yourself, and hopefully that multi-level understanding of what you're going for, and then to kind of maybe resist a little bit of that siren's call into staying, like really, really firmly planting your feet into either that kind of deep sympathetic or that deep dorsal response, and being like, oh, I've got to like move back towards connection.
It's so important. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, another theory that I came to around the time I came to the theory of positive disintegration was relational cultural theory, which
Mm.
talks about really the impact of connection and disconnection. There's so many things I was learning at the same time that like the overlap is just it's amazing to me.
Oh, yeah.
Like for me, like having relationships is like the most important thing in the world, like being in
Yeah.
connection. And then when I was young, even though I was a fight responder, what's really beautiful about my story is I had all of these adults who were able to be like supportive presences for me and safe people for me to lash out at and just be terrible to. Because I mean, when I was young, it was like and so Dąbrowski's work for that is it's an ambitendency. Like when I was a
Mm.
kid, I was like the worst to the people who were kindest to me. Like the people who were nice to me, I was like, go fuck yourself. And so, like, I really remembered myself badly as a kid because I was like lashing out at everybody because I was like so hurt. But like
Mhm.
these people really saw me and they were
Mhm.
so great. And I considered them trusted adults. I mean, lo and behold, all of these theories make sense of
Mhm.
what it was that like saved me when I was young. Cause
Mhm.
I'm sure that I would have killed myself if I hadn't been able to find relationships with people who could be there for me when I was young.
Mhm. Totally. Two
So
things.
learning about co-regulation was so powerful. I was like,
Totally.
oh yes, totally.
Well, this connection, this the way we're talking about relationship and the social engagement system. I mean, yeah, it like your life is better, but what's fascinating about polyvagal theory is this is literally what is underneath our health, our well-being. I mean, like when you're in relationship, your liver is functioning better, your brain is functioning better, your actual heart beats differently. So it's fascinating. This isn't just like, oh, golly gee, life's better when I'm in relationship. I mean, this is what polyvagal theory explains, is that our bodies are designed to be in relationship, and this is the actual foundation of our health. And, we try in the Western world to separate this with body, mind, spirit. It doesn't matter. All three. Okay, yes. It is the foundation of body, mind, spirit health. I mean, as I say, our organ function is incredibly influenced by whether we're in connection mode or protection mode. So much so that, a lot of times when people hear about the vagus nerve, they hear like, oh, vagal toning. You can get a vagal stimulator, or you can hum, or you can sing, and our breathing, all those things are 100% true. But what also is true and is, perhaps the most impactful is being in a relationship. So this conversation, that's what's so cool about it, right? Is all of us feel good, our brains are working, right? Our hearts feel sort of open. But this is a vitamin. This is like getting an IV right now, and you're having all the goods be put into your actual flesh, because this conversation is a vagal toner just because we're in relationship. Chris, when you were talking about how it was good for you to like hear what Emma and I talking about our experience of, having a more dorsal, that our threat response is more of a shutdown. What's really fascinating is it's so good for us to know them all really well because typically when we're in partnership with a person, one is red, one is blue. So in most kind of relationships, there's a person who has a red tendency and a person who has a blue tendency. So it's always really good if we can understand our friends, loved ones,
I'm
partners,
laughing
right?
because, like, yeah, if
Is
Jason
he blue?
was also like me, no, I mean, how could we live together if we were both
Right.
like this? Well, that's how, yeah, I mean, but people do live like that, and it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
It's good to have, yeah, I mean, I think that the key to our relationship is how he is able to absorb the way I am so well, and we're just so,
Mm,
we complement each other so beautifully, I think, in the ways that we are.
mm. Well, and like for me, as I get healthier, I can move into a red response and I can be like, hey, 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 right? So I can kind of be like Michael, like, like I can like
He's a
challenge.
porcupine. He
Well,
definitely is.
it's good for me to really, and Emma, this is sort of a question for you too. Like, so for me, as I become more responsible and the more like sovereignty that I can inhabit means I will, move into a red space more consciously. So, like, kind of be in that more shut down and then notice, oh, wait, you can't just pull out. You can't just like go numb. You have to go in there and move right into conflict and try and have enough courage and grit to do that. Do you notice that, Emma?
Yes, I've noticed I can get a little bit red and snappy, but I get red and snappy when I feel safe,
Yep.
actually, in expressing my feelings. Like
Yeah.
with people
That's what
that
I'm
it's,
saying.
yeah. So, and it's funny because, like, that whole thing about a red person and a blue person together, when that power balance gets out of control, because arguably the red person's going to be venting all their feelings and having everything they have to say, and the blue person's just going to be sitting there feeling threatened. That's really bad. So I found that with me and my husband, we kind of like, now that I'm in a place of safety, we kind of cycle through these things. And at first we're kind of testing each other with it. And it's like, okay, that doesn't work. And like, because your defenses are starting to fall away a little bit. And then the red comes out. It's like, okay, how do we get back to the green space? And sometimes
Yeah.
it's about literally going, okay, the disagreement about at the moment is about, I don't know, coffee mug. I say that because it's sitting on my desk, right? We're having a disagreement about coffee mug. And someone's going blue and the other person's like, why do you refuse to engage with me and talk about this stuff? And the other person's red and it's like, why are you raising your voice at me? Like, what did I do wrong? It's like, okay, let's park discussion about coffee mug to one side for a moment and have a separate conversation about how we react and why we react. And it's like, okay, well, I tend to shut down because you raise your voice at me. I feel threatened. I don't know how to handle it. I go into blue mode. Okay, well, I'm raising my voice because I feel abandoned and I don't feel like you're listening to me. And when you shut down, I think you hear nothing that I say. So sometimes that's a good way to get to collectively back to green space together is to put coffee mug aside for 2 seconds. We can always get back to that disagreement later when we're in a better headspace and go off and say, okay, why are you reacting the way you do? Because I'm reading it one way and maybe the other person is just like, look, I'm not shutting down because I'm not listening to you or I don't care. This is the reasons for my reaction. So that's my tip of the day.
Well, totally, because what you're talking about is a little bit of curiosity, a question. You said, like, well, why are you this? And so that's what's really interesting about this green space is that this ventral space this is where we creative problem solve. This is creativity. This is curiosity. This is learning. And so when you said, oh, okay, we're going to shelve this, that's consciously bringing in a little bit of that green ventral energy by being curious about what's happening for the other person. The other two tips I have that are more body based is if people can go for a walk or just even if you could, walk laps in your house or whatever, while you're doing it, it will help. Because what's really fascinating is that so the body that has a tendency to go into that blue shutdown, if that body's in motion, like it's walking, then that is our movement like that. Although the skeletal muscles firing, that's all a part of the sympathetic part of our autonomic nervous system. And so it's helping that body kind of stay engaged and keeping it a little bit closer to red than to just into a full blue. And for that person that's already in red, that body, it has so much sympathetic charge that by moving around, the muscles again are like metabolizing some of that red energy. So if a partnership is going into sort of, this well-worn groove of, a regular conflict, or it could be a brand new conflict. Oh my gosh, if you're able to like, hey, let's go for a walk. You could just, walk around the block however many times. It will really help support the conversation because both bodies are going to have the best opportunity that they can to move towards some more green ventral space. The other thing is if it's possible for the bodies to touch. So even just like holding hands, it's really interesting. Or I just thought of this. How interesting would it be to try and stay in an argument like that? But if it's your romantic partner, but like you're trading foot rubs. You know what I mean? Like you're sitting foot to foot on a couch and it's like the one person is talking and you're like rubbing their feet, listening to how they're upset, and then they're rubbing your foot while you talk about how you're upset. Like it is naturally just going to become more constructive and less destructive if there's any sort of touch happening.
That's a great point.
This concludes this first part of the conversation. I'd like to thank our guest Autumn for joining us, thank Chris, because it's always a pleasure, and thank you too, listeners. And I hope you'll join us in the future for the second part of this conversation. Continue your path to authenticity through the links in the show notes. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter for stacks of cool things delivered straight to your inbox. Explore the Dąbrowski Centre, email us, or join us on social media. And don't forget to show your love by liking, subscribing, grabbing some positive Disintegration merch, or leaving us a rating or review on your podcast platform.